back porch. So glad to have you. You know, when I was growing up, my mother made rolls, good rolls, but for crescent rolls, the very favorite of everybody, she always bought the tube, the Doughboy tube. Well, now that I've learned how easy they are to make, I will never ever buy the tube again. It's time to ditch the tube. Here are the ingredients. I'm going to give you a second to write them down. You can pause. Now let's get cooking. Now let's go over those ingredients. I've got 4 cups of flour here. I'm using bread flour. You can use all-purpose flour. This is 3/4 cup milk. It's warm, somewhere between 90 and 110 degrees. That's going to be about 100. I've got a stick of butter chopped up and softened, 2 eggs, a 1/4 cup sugar, and I have to tell you the original recipe called for a 1/2 cup, but a 1/4 is enough. And then I've got instant yeast here, 5 teaspoons full. That would be the equivalent of 2 packs. And I've got here a teaspoonful of salt. Also need a 1/4 cup of warm water. Now I'm using instant yeast so you don't have to proof it, but in case you have active dry yeast on hand, you can use it. I pour in my milk and the yeast and then the sugar. And this is to proof active dry yeast. And you just do that and you stir it up and you wait about 5 minutes and make sure that it starts to get foamy on top. I'm not going to wait that 5 minutes. I'm just showing you this in case you're using active dry. With the instant yeast, I'm just not going to wait. I'm going to beat my eggs up here and get them ready to go in. Oops, there's a couple of little grains of yeast. I'm going to get them on in there. So I actually use instant yeast in almost everything. And this has already started to foam a little bit. I'm going to stir it down and then add the rest of the ingredients. Almost all the rest. That's my eggs. I'll pour those in. And then the flour. Now I'm going to put in all except about a 1/2 cup flour. This makes a very stiff batter, and I may not need the last 1/2 cup, but I'll have it just in case. And I'm going to go ahead and start with my dough hook, even though really, probably, you ought to start with the paddle. And you'll see why later. As I said, it's a really stiff dough, and at some point in this, you're going to look at it and say, oh no, that's not right. That dough's too stiff. But I promise it works out just fine at the end. Stick with me. And I'm just using the dough hook because I don't like all that scraping it off the paddle. So I'm going to add the salt now after it starts mixing. And I'm just going to mix it until it all comes together really well. Now you'll notice I didn't add the butter yet. That's one reason that the dough is so stiff up until the final stages. We add the butter at the end. And if you see that it's not all pulling together, we're going to add that 1/4 cup of water, and I'll add it a couple tablespoons full at a time because I want just enough of it for the dough to pull clean from the bowl. And then we'll add our butter. This is very soft. I had it out for about an hour. I'm going to add it 1 tablespoonful at a time, and I'll scrape it down as I need to get it all incorporated in. And you know, the dough hook has a hard time with greasy dough. You may have to help it. And once all the butter's in, I'm going to add the rest of this flour, this 1/2 cup, a tablespoonful at a time, until it all pulls together. And as I said, you may have to help it a little bit with a spatula. The buttery dough may need some help. So would it have been easier to put the butter in at the beginning? Probably so. Why did I put it in at the end? Well, from following Julia Child's bread recipe, I learned that if you incorporate the butter in later, you get a better flavor. And I don't really know the science of why. I just know that the taste is different and the butter flavor just pops in your mouth. And this takes a little bit longer, but really you can taste the difference. Or I can taste the difference. Maybe it's my imagination. but I don't think so. Anyway, as this pulls together, and I do want you to watch it a little bit because it started out so thick you probably thought it wasn't going to pull together. You know, once you've made this dough, you can use it for anything that you would use the crescent dough for. When it pulls together, start your timer. We're going to knead it for 5 minutes. Now that's some pretty dough. It's very elastic. This is at the end of the 5-minute knead. I'm going to take this out and I'm not doing the window pane test, which I would do on a loaf of bread. This is a little bit different consistency. See how clean it pulled the bowl? And it's a very kind of stiff and elastic dough. Feels good to the hands. We're going to make it into a nice round ball just here on the counter. Just make it smooth. Work it around. And then I'm going to put this in my proofing bowl once I've got it nice and smooth. And I've just used the butter wrapper to oil this, and to rub some on the very top too to keep it from forming a crust. I'll roll it around a little bit, and then I'll put the lid on. Now this needs to proof, to rise, for about 90 minutes or until it's double in size. And when I give you a time, it's not exact. You just are watching for the dough to rise to about double. You watch the dough, not the clock. I'm going to set this in a warm spot, draft free, and I'll check it in an hour. And 80 minutes later, this is what I've got. It's probably a little bit more than double. You can check it. Poke a hole in it. If it doesn't fill right up, it's proofed long enough, risen long enough. So we're going to punch it down, let some of the gas out, and I'll turn it out onto a lightly floured surface. You can just use your counter if you want to. My counter's ceramic, so I always use a silicone or cloth pad for this. We're going to punch it down some more and then divide the dough in half. I'll sort of put it in a shape where I can do that. And you know, you can weigh this if you want to. I'm going to eyeball it. And I'm not great at eyeballing, but it's close enough for me. But if you really want to make sure that it's exactly half, weigh it. And I'm going to form this 1/2 into another ball. I'm going to put it back in my proofing bowl, and I'll put it in the fridge and let it stay overnight, and I will have rolls again tomorrow. I don't need to make 24. I don't have anybody here to eat 24. So I'm going to make 12. I'll butter it again, put the lid on it, and I'll refrigerate it. And it'll continue to rise. It'll rise again in the fridge, but it'll be a slow rise. And tomorrow I'll punch it down and shape it and have fresh crescent rolls again. So I'm going to work this a little bit because I want to get it into a nice circle. And my pad, you can see, has guides for that, which is very helpful. I'm pinching this off in the bottom here just to sort of make sure that it's uniform when I start my circle. And I'm going to get my rolling pin, and I'm going to roll this pretty aggressively. It will form bubbles while I'm rolling it out. I want to beat all those out. And I want to end up with a nice circle about 12 inches. And it's more important that you end up with 1/2 inch dough, 1/2 inch thick dough, than that you end up with a certain size. I've noticed a lot of recipes call for a 16-inch circle. This will be 12, 14 inches, something like that. But you want to have it about a 1/2 inch thick. So whatever size circle you end up with, that's the right size as long as your dough is about 1/2 inch thick. Now, you may have to let this rest a little bit because it keeps pulling back. And I think I forgot to tell you that I let it rest about 5 to 10 minutes before I started rolling. I'm sure I forgot to tell you that. I'm telling you that now. So it's pretty tough. It's pretty sturdy. You can move it around however you need to. Just make sure that you don't let it stick. If you have to add some more flour, you can, but you probably won't. And we're getting there. And I'll tell you again, I'm rolling this pretty aggressively. And in case you worry about it, if you think you're overworking it, it's really hard to overwork yeast dough. This is not pie crust. This is not biscuits. You don't have to be gentle. You can work it. It's tough. It can stand up to it. So I'm going to sort of make this into a circle shape. Some people would actually take a pizza cutter and cut it around to make a perfect circle. That would be some other people, not me. So now we're going to butter it. And I'm about an inch from the edge, half an inch. I want a little bit that's not buttered. This is very soft butter, and we just want to put a thin layer of butter on it before we cut them. And you can cut these with a pizza cutter or a dough cutter. I've got my little straight edge here. And once again, I'm going to eyeball it. And I want to cut this into quarters. And once I get the first one cut, I've got a guide on this Silpat sheet so I can see where half is, approximately. See, it's under there. So I'm going to cut this into quarters. You can also use a knife. And then when we're done cutting it in quarters, I'm going to cut each quarter into 3 pieces, and that's going to give us a dozen crescent rolls. Now, let me just tell you, I'm the world's worst eyeballer. You are probably much better at it than I am. So now let's make the crescents. Take a piece, start at the big end, stretch a little bit, and then roll. And roll them kind of tight. And we've got butter on it, so it makes it a little bit hard to stick. But that little point, I pinch it just a tad, just a little bit. And then I put it on my parchment paper, and you can just use an oiled cookie sheet. Put the point side down. Let me show you another one. Stretch it out a little bit. And then just a nice, tight roll to the very end. Pinch that just a little bit. Pinch the tip and put it down. I'll do the rest of these and come back. So all done. I'm going to put a little butter on a piece of plastic. As predicted, my size is not uniform. Yours will be better. And I'm going to cover these in plastic and let them rise about another 20 to 30 minutes. Hard to tell when they've doubled in size, but 20 to 30 minutes will be enough. And they will look like this. Nice and puffy. I had one come loose. Kind of gently, going to pinch it. Otherwise, it'll just unfold when it cooks. And that happens sometimes. Happens to me. We're going to do one last step. I bet you can guess what it is. I'm going to butter them again before I bake them. Now, a little note here. If you want the shiny finish, you can use some egg wash. 1 egg beaten with about a tablespoonful of water, and brush them with egg wash instead. And that'll give you a shinier, crisper finish. I like the softer, chewier finish, but that's up to you. So when we get these all buttered, I'll put them on the center rack of a 400-degree preheated oven for 12 to 15 minutes. You'll just watch for them to be golden brown. They're going to be so yummy. See, here they are, yummy and golden. And of course, there's one more thing, again, with the butter. These are buttery crescent rolls. This takes a lot of butter. And remember what Julia Child used to say, you don't have to use real butter, but you'll be sorry if you don't. Look at this. This is so perfect. I'm so happy. Well, some of them are bigger than the others. That's okay. I'm the world's worst eyeballer. And they're small enough in size that if they're a little different, it's not going to matter with cooking time. So let's eat this one. Let me pull it apart and show you. I want you to see the texture. See that? see that wonderful softness inside. And yes, you can taste the butter all the way through it and on top of it and under it. And gee, nothing's better than butter. These are just great. I mean, they're wonderful. When I was a little girl, I used to unroll them and eat them that way. And I'm not a little girl anymore, but I'm going to try it. And you can really get that soft bread texture in there. I hope you try these. And just remember, if you want them for your holiday table, you can make your dough the day before and refrigerate it. It works just fine. And remember, if you want to make one of the gazillion recipes on the internet that call for crescent roll dough, you can just make these instead. No need to buy a tube. Ditch the tube. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch. Hope to see you again tomorrow.